It was a quiet night in the small town where Alex lived, the streets empty except for the soft hum of streetlights. He had just finished his dinner and stepped outside to take out the trash. The cool air carried a faint hint of rain, and Alex's mind wandered to the usual worries of life: bills, work, and the broken fence in his backyard. As he approached the garbage bins near the alley, something unusual caught his eye. A figure, hunched and shivering, was rummaging through the trash. At first, Alex thought it might be a stray animal, but as he moved closer, the figure turned to face him. It wasn't human. Her eyes glowed faintly, a striking shade of teal that seemed to pierce the darkness. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and strange metallic tattoos shimmered under the dim light. She wore tattered clothing that didn't look like anything Alex had ever seen before. For a moment, they both froze, staring at each other. Alex felt a mix of fear and curiosity. Was this some kind of prank? A lost cosplayer? But no, her exhausted expression and trembling hands were too real. "Are you okay?" Alex asked cautiously, his voice steady despite the strange situation. The alien woman flinched at his words, her gaze darting toward the street, as if she was about to run. Alex raised his hands, palms open, to show he meant no harm. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. "Do you need help?" For a moment, she didn't respond. Her eyes flickered to the garbage bin, then back to Alex, as if weighing her options. Finally, in a hoarse voice, she spoke. "Food, please." Her words were barely audible, but they struck Alex like a bolt of lightning. Whoever, or whatever, she was desperate. Without thinking, he gestured toward his house. "I can get you something to eat," he offered. "Come inside." The alien hesitated, her body tense, as if she expected a trap. Alex took a step back, giving her space. "It's safe," he said. "I promise." After a long pause, she nodded, her movements cautious and unsteady. Alex led her to his house, his heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and disbelief. As they entered, Alex quickly cleared the clutter from his small living room and motioned for her to sit. She perched on the edge of the couch, her posture stiff, as though ready to flee at any moment. "Wait here," Alex said, heading to the kitchen. He grabbed a loaf of bread, some cheese, and a glass of water, keeping an eye on her from the corner of his vision. When he returned, she reached for the food with trembling hands. She ate quickly, but not like someone who had been taught human manners. It was raw hunger. Alex sat nearby, watching her cautiously. He didn't know who she was or where she had come from, but one thing was clear: she needed help. And for some reason, he felt compelled to give it. Alex sat in silence, watching the alien woman as she ate. Her movements were quick and desperate, like someone who hadn't eaten in days. Crumbs fell onto the couch, but Alex didn't care. He was too busy trying to process what was happening. The glow in her eyes dimmed slightly as she finished the food, and she leaned back on the couch, looking more relaxed but still alert. Alex noticed her hands, thin and delicate, with faint scars crisscrossing her skin. She clutched a small metallic device tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping her safe. "What's your name?" Alex asked, his voice soft. She hesitated, her teal eyes narrowing as if trying to decide whether to trust him. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and accented in a way Alex couldn't place. "Cetra," she said, pronouncing it carefully. "Cetra," Alex repeated, testing the name. "I'm Alex." She didn't respond, her gaze darting around the room, scanning every corner like she expected something or someone to appear. "Are you running from someone?" Alex asked gently, leaning forward. Cetra's grip on the metallic device tightened, and she looked at him sharply. "Yes," she said. They will find me." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. Whoever they were, it was clear Cetra was terrified of them. "You're safe here," Alex said. "No one will find you in this house." Cetra looked at him, her expression unreadable. Why? Help me? Alex hesitated. He didn't have a clear answer. Maybe it was the desperation in her voice, or the way she looked so out of place and vulnerable. Something about her made him want to help, even if it didn't make sense. Because you need it, he said simply. Cetra's shoulders relaxed just a little, though her eyes still held suspicion. She set the metallic device down on the coffee table, and Alex took the opportunity to glance at it. It was small and sleek, covered in symbols that glowed faintly. "What is that?" Alex asked, nodding toward the device. Cetra quickly snatched it back, holding it close to her chest. "It's important," she said, her tone firm. "Don't ask." Alex raised his hands in surrender. "All right. None of my business." The tension in the room hung heavy, but Alex decided not to press her further. Instead, he stood up and grabbed a blanket from the nearby closet. "You can stay here tonight," he said, draping the blanket over the back of the couch. "It's not much, but it's warm." Cetra blinked, surprised. "You trust me?" Alex shrugged. "Let's just say I'm giving you the benefit of the doubt." Cetra didn't reply, but she carefully pulled the blanket over herself and curled up on the couch, still holding the device. Alex watched her for a moment before heading to his own room. As he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of trouble he'd just brought into his life, and if he'd made the right choice. The next morning, the soft morning light filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room. Alex woke up to find the house still quiet, except for the faint sound of Cetra shifting on the couch. He rubbed his eyes and stretched, trying to shake off the feeling of uncertainty that had lingered in his mind all night. He walked into the living room and found Cetra sitting up, her eyes wide open, scanning every corner of the room. She looked different in the daylight, less frightened, but still distant. Alex hesitated before speaking. "Morning," he said softly. Cetra turned her head, her teal eyes locking onto him. She didn't smile, but there was a slight nod of acknowledgement. "Morning," she replied, her voice hoarse but clearer than the night before. Alex sat down across from her, his curiosity growing. "Are you okay? How do you feel?" Cetra hesitated, her fingers running lightly over the surface of the small metallic device she had been holding since the night before. "Better," she said, but her eyes betrayed a deep sense of unease. "But not safe." Alex frowned. "Who's after you? What's going on?" Cetra stared at the floor for a long time, unsure whether she should trust him with the truth. The silence stretched on, and Alex could almost feel the weight of her hesitation. Finally, she spoke in a low, almost whispering voice. "I am not from here," she said. "I am from a distant planet, a place far beyond your world." Alex blinked, not sure if he had heard her correctly. "A planet?" he asked, his voice rising slightly. "Wait, you're saying you're from space?" Cetra nodded slowly. "Yes. My people are called the Vorian. We are not like you. We have lived through much, but now we are being hunted. My planet was taken by a cruel empire, and I was sent here to find help." Alex sat back, his mind racing. An alien from another planet, sent to Earth for help. The idea felt like something straight out of a science fiction novel. But her expression told him she wasn't lying. There was too much fear in her eyes, too much pain. "Why did they send you?" Alex asked, trying to process everything. "What kind of help are you looking for?" Cetra looked up at him, her eyes serious and filled with something that made Alex's stomach twist: desperation. "I was carrying something," she said, her voice trembling. "A device. It has plans. Plans that could stop the Empire from destroying everything. But they found me before I could reach the right people. They killed everyone I was with." Alex felt his heart sink. "You're the last one, aren't you?" She nodded, her eyes downcast. "I am. And they will come for me again. I can't run forever." Alex felt a surge of sympathy for her. She wasn't just some lost traveler. She was a survivor, carrying the weight of her people's future. Her words echoed in his mind, and suddenly, the stakes felt much higher than just hiding her from the authorities. If what she said was true, the whole planet was at risk. "I won't let them get you," Alex said, his voice firm. He had no idea what he was getting into, but something in him couldn't let her face this alone. Cetra looked up at him, her eyes wide in surprise. "You would help me, even after what I told you?" Alex nodded without hesitation. "I don't know exactly what's going on, but I can't just leave you out there. We'll figure this out together." For the first time, Cetra gave him a small, uncertain smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make Alex feel like he had made the right choice. Alex's resolve to help Cetra was stronger than ever, but the feeling of unease lingered in the back of his mind. The more he learned about her, the deeper the hole he seemed to be digging for himself. But he couldn't back out now, not when her life was on the line. The following day passed in a blur of planning. Cetra was quiet, her mind clearly focused on the danger she was in. She kept checking the window, scanning the surroundings, every little noise making her tense up. Alex couldn't help but notice how alert she was. This wasn't just fear, it was survival instinct. "You're safe here for now." Alex reassured her again, but his voice lacked conviction. He could feel the weight of her fear pressing on him. He knew it wouldn't be long before someone came looking for her. By evening, Alex's worst fear started to come true. It began with a strange rumble in the distance, barely noticeable at first, like a low thunderstorm. But Cetra's reaction was immediate. She stood up from the couch, her eyes wide, scanning the area. Her sharp senses had picked up something Alex hadn't noticed. "They're here," she whispered, her voice tense and urgent. Alex's heart skipped a beat. "Who?" "The people after you." Cetra didn't answer directly, but the look in her eyes said everything. She was sure of it. Alex rushed to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peek outside. A black, sleek vehicle was parked across the street. It didn't look like anything Alex had seen before, not even close. The lights on the vehicle flashed in patterns that made it clear it was scanning the area. "They're using tech to track you, aren't they?" Alex asked, turning back to her. Cetra nodded. "Their trackers can't pinpoint exactly where I am, but they're close. Too close." Alex didn't waste time. "We need to move. Now." She hesitated. "They'll catch us if we go out there. I can't risk leading them to more people." Alex thought for a moment, then grabbed his jacket and tossed it to her. "You stay low. I'll do what I can to buy us some time." Cetra stared at the jacket in her hands, unsure. But then, after a long pause, she pulled it on. She didn't argue. "I'll follow your lead," she said quietly. Alex grabbed his phone, thinking quickly. He had a friend who worked at a security company, a guy named Mark who could help him set up some distractions. He called Mark, explaining only the basics. "I need a favor, fast. Can you disable the cameras around my house? And can you set off some alarms nearby? Something loud, to draw attention away from here." Mark was confused but agreed. "Got it. I'll handle it." As soon as he hung up, Alex turned to Cetra. "I'll distract them. You get to the back door, and don't look back." She nodded, a flicker of trust in her eyes. But before Alex could reach the door, the sound of heavy boots on the street outside echoed through the quiet night. Cetra's eyes widened in panic. "They're here." Alex glanced at her and made a decision. "Go now." He pushed her gently toward the back door, hearing the first signs of the pursuers drawing closer. The air around them felt thick with tension, and Alex could almost feel the cold breath of danger on his neck. With one last look, Cetra slipped into the night, leaving Alex to face whatever was coming. The night air was cool and heavy with tension as Alex heard the first distant thud of boots nearing his front door. He stood frozen for a moment, unsure whether to follow through with his plan to create a distraction or if he should run. His heart raced as he thought of Cetra, alone outside, in the hands of people who wanted her gone. He couldn't let that happen. Taking a deep breath, Alex grabbed a small portable speaker from the shelf and connected it to his phone. He set the volume to the maximum and pressed play. A loud, blaring siren noise filled the room. The sound was shrill and ear-piercing, designed to attract attention from anyone within earshot. The sound was Alex's first step in diverting attention away from Cetra. He glanced nervously out the window, praying the noise would be enough to throw off their pursuers. He knew this wasn't a perfect plan, but it was the best he could come up with in a matter of minutes. As the siren echoed into the night, Alex darted to the door, glancing one last time at the dark alley where Cetra had vanished. He needed to find her. He had to make sure she was safe. Just as he reached for the door handle, he heard a faint sound. Footsteps, much closer now. He froze. His heart pounded in his chest. The pursuers had arrived. "Alex," a voice called from behind him, and he spun around to find Cetra standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, eyes wide with fear. "They're getting closer," she said, her voice breathless. She hadn't run far, but she had managed to stay hidden, thanks to the siren. Alex quickly stepped aside to let her in, closing the door behind her. "We don't have much time," he whispered. "We need to move now." Cetra nodded, her expression grim. But just before they could leave, she looked down at the device in her hands, the one she'd been clutching since they first met. "I need to show you something," she said, her voice full of urgency. "What is it?" Alex asked, confused. He had so many questions, but now wasn't the time to ask them all. Cetra carefully placed the device on the coffee table, the soft light from the lamp reflecting off the small metallic object. Alex looked at it closely, noticing the symbols etched into the surface. They glowed faintly, almost as if alive. "This is why they're after me," she said, her eyes meeting Alex's. "This device contains information about a weapon, one powerful enough to destroy entire fleets, but it can also be used to stop them. The Empire won't stop until they have it. They need it to maintain their control." Alex swallowed hard, trying to process what she had just revealed. "So this thing is like a key to stopping a powerful weapon." "Yes," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "If I can get it to the right people, we can end this, but the Empire won't let that happen." Alex looked at the device, realizing the weight of what it held. It wasn't just a small piece of technology. It was the key to saving, or destroying, countless lives. And now it was in his hands too. "We need to get this to safety," Alex said, his voice determined. "We're not stopping until we do." Cetra looked at him, her face softening for a moment. "You don't have to help me, Alex. You could leave. It's dangerous." "I'm not leaving you," Alex said, meeting her gaze. "We're in this together." Cetra looked at the device, then back at Alex, and for the first time, there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Alex nodded, gripping the device tightly. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Cetra by his side, he wasn't afraid to face whatever came next. The air outside was cool but thick with tension. Alex and Cetra crouched low, moving quickly but quietly through the narrow alley behind his house. They could still hear the blaring siren in the distance, but Alex knew it wouldn't hold off the pursuers for long. The alarm had only bought them a little time. "We need to get to the safe house," Cetra whispered, her eyes scanning the dark streets. She moved with a speed and grace Alex hadn't expected, as though she was used to running from danger. Alex nodded, keeping his voice low. "How far is it? The safe house, I mean." "It's not far," Cetra said, her voice steady despite the fear that still lingered in her eyes. "But we'll have to be careful. They're using tracking devices. If we stay on the main roads, they'll catch up to us quickly." Alex glanced around, trying to figure out the best path. The city was quiet, too quiet for his liking. There were no sounds of cars or people, just the distant hum of a few streetlights and the occasional rustle of leaves. It was the perfect environment for something to go wrong. "Then we'll stay off the roads," Alex said. "I know a few shortcuts through the old subway tunnels. They're abandoned, so there's a good chance we can avoid detection." Cetra's eyes widened slightly, and she gave him a sharp look. "You know the tunnels." Alex smiled nervously. "Yeah, I used to explore them when I was younger. They're not the safest, but they're perfect for this." The more he thought about it, the more he realized how risky their journey was. They were about to venture into a network of dark, forgotten tunnels that hadn't been used in years. The tunnels were the last place anyone would go looking for them, but they were also full of hidden dangers, unstable walls, old machinery, and maybe even some unexpected animals. But there was no time to hesitate. Alex led the way, moving quickly but carefully, navigating through the familiar shortcuts. He glanced back at Cetra, who followed closely behind, her steps quiet and sure. Despite her fear, she moved like someone who had been trained for this kind of situation. Alex didn't know much about her past, but he was starting to understand that she had survived a lot worse than this. As they reached the entrance to the old subway tunnel, Alex paused, glancing down at the dark opening. It was just a small metal door, rusted and covered in grime, but it hid a whole underground world. He took a deep breath and pushed it open. The air inside the tunnel was musty and damp, the smell of mold and rust filling his nostrils. It was dark, but Alex pulled out his phone and used its flashlight to guide them. "This way," Alex said, gesturing for Cetra to follow him. They walked deeper into the tunnels, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. It was eerily quiet, the only sound the faint buzz of the lights above them, and their hurried breathing. "Do you think we're safe here?" Alex asked quietly, his voice low. Cetra didn't answer right away. She was too focused on listening for any sounds of pursuit. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "For now," she said, "but we can't stay in these tunnels forever. They'll find us sooner or later. We have to keep moving." Alex nodded, his heart racing. He knew Cetra was right. The danger wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The dark tunnel seemed endless. Every turn felt like it led them deeper into a forgotten world. The sound of their footsteps echoed off the damp walls as Alex and Cetra moved cautiously through the maze of tunnels beneath the city. The cold air made Alex's breath visible in the dim light, but the chill was nothing compared to the fear that gripped him. They had been walking for what felt like hours, each step carrying them further away from the safety of Alex's home. He glanced at Cetra, who moved silently beside him. Despite her fear, her movements were graceful, almost fluid. She was clearly used to danger, but for Alex, this was all new, and every part of him screamed that they were running out of time. "We're almost there," Alex whispered, trying to keep his voice steady. He knew the way through the tunnels, but Cetra didn't. She followed him without question, trusting that he knew what he was doing. "Almost." Cetra's voice was tired, but there was a note of hope in it. "Are you sure this path is safe?" Alex nodded. "Yes, we should be able to reach the old safe house soon. It's been abandoned for years, so no one will be there. We'll be able to rest for a bit and plan our next move." The thought of a safe place to rest, even just for a few hours, filled Alex with relief. But as they turned a corner, that relief was short-lived. A loud noise echoed down the tunnel, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Several pairs, heavy and deliberate. Alex froze. Cetra's body tensed beside him, her eyes wide with panic. "Hide," Cetra hissed. But it was too late. Before Alex could react, the tunnel ahead lit up with harsh beams of light. Figures in dark armor emerged, their helmets reflecting the light from the flashlight in Alex's hand. The soldiers were relentless, methodical, and they were closing in fast. "Run," Cetra shouted. Alex didn't hesitate. He grabbed Cetra's hand and pulled her behind a large rusted pipe. They crouched low, breathing as quietly as possible. The soldiers passed by them, their boots thudding against the ground with terrifying precision. Alex's heart pounded in his chest, his entire body tense with fear. If the soldiers found them now, there would be no escape. But just as the last of the soldiers walked past, Alex heard a voice. It wasn't one of the soldiers. It was someone familiar. Alex. He froze. His stomach dropped. The voice was unmistakable. It was Mark, the friend he had contacted earlier to set up the distractions. "Mark, what are you doing here?" Alex whispered, trying to keep his voice down. "I had to come," Mark replied. He stepped into view, his face grim. "They're not just after Citra, Alex. They're after the device. The one she's carrying. I'm with them. I'm sorry." Alex's heart sank as Mark's words hit him like a punch. Betrayed. Mark had been working with the Empire all along. Everything Alex had done to help Citra, all the trust he placed in his friend. Had it been a lie? Mark stepped closer, his eyes filled with regret. "It's not too late, Alex. You don't have to do this. You can leave now, and they won't hurt you." Alex's mind raced. Betrayal was sharp and sudden, like a knife in his gut. But Citra was right next to him. He couldn't just abandon her. He wouldn't. "We're not going anywhere," Alex said, his voice steady despite the storm inside. "If you want to live, you'll help us get out of here. Otherwise, you're on your own." For a moment, Mark hesitated, his face conflicted. Then, without a word, he nodded. "I'll help you," he said quietly. "But we need to move fast." With Mark's help, they had a chance. Alex could only hope it was enough. The danger was still there, but they had one last shot at survival. The tunnel was deathly quiet after Mark's reluctant promise. The soldiers were still a threat, but for the moment, they had a small window of time to act. Alex, Citra, and Mark crouched in the shadows, the only sound their hurried breaths and the faint echo of distant footsteps. "We don't have much time," Citra whispered, her eyes scanning the darkness. "They'll start searching here soon." Alex nodded, his mind racing. He had no plan, no backup, but he couldn't afford to think about that now. All that mattered was getting Citra out of the city and somewhere safe. Mark, clearly feeling the pressure, spoke up. "I know a way out. A back exit. It's not much, but it's better than staying here." Without waiting for a response, Mark turned and began to lead them through the winding tunnel, his footsteps confident and steady. Citra stayed close behind, but Alex hesitated for a second. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He had trusted Mark, but now, with the betrayal hanging in the air, he couldn't be sure of anything. He had to focus. They didn't have time for doubt. As they reached a hidden door at the back of the tunnel, Mark paused. "This leads to an abandoned warehouse a few blocks away. From there, we can get to the outskirts, where there's a safe zone. But we'll have to move quickly." Alex's heart pounded in his chest. Every second felt like an eternity, and the fear of being caught was suffocating. He glanced at Citra, who looked determined but weary. She had been running for too long, and Alex could see the toll it had taken on her. "Let's go," Alex said firmly. They pushed through the door, which creaked open to reveal a dark, dusty room. The faint light from Alex's phone illuminated the space, revealing old crates and equipment. It was a perfect hiding place, but they couldn't stay here long. Suddenly, the sound of boots echoed down the tunnel again. The soldiers were getting closer. Alex's heart raced, and for a split second, panic threatened to take over. But he forced it back down. "We have to move now," he urged. Mark led them toward the far side of the warehouse, where a small metal door was barely visible behind some crates. He moved swiftly, his eyes constantly checking over his shoulder. "Just a little further," Mark said, his voice low and tense. But as they neared the door, a loud crash echoed from the tunnel they had just exited. The soldiers had found their hiding spot. "Go, now," Mark shouted. Alex, Citra, and Mark all bolted for the exit, pushing through the door just as the first soldier entered the warehouse. They ran blindly into the night, the cool air rushing past them as they sprinted toward the safety of the streets. The sound of chasing footsteps grew louder, but they couldn't stop now. They were so close. As they reached the edge of the street, Mark grabbed Alex's arm and pulled him toward a nearby alley. "This way. I know a place we can hide." Alex barely had time to process what was happening before they were in the shadows of another building, hidden from view. They all stopped, panting heavily, their bodies shaking with adrenaline. "We lost them," Mark said, his voice ragged. "For now." Cetra looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but sincere. Alex nodded, still processing everything that had happened. They had made it this far, but the hardest part was yet to come. The Empire was still out there, and Cetra's mission wasn't over. But for now, they had survived, and that was enough. The night felt endless as they crouched in the shadows of the alley, trying to catch their breath. Alex's legs burned from running, and his heart still hammered in his chest. They had narrowly escaped the soldiers, but the relief was short-lived. The threat was far from over. Mark glanced around nervously. "We need to keep moving. It's not safe here." Alex nodded, his mind racing. The plan had been to get to the safe house, but now that they were this close, he knew they had to do more. Cetra's mission couldn't end like this. She was carrying the key to stopping the Empire's weapon, but they were running out of time. "We need to get the device to the Resistance," Alex said, his voice firm. "There's no point in hiding. We have to send the signal." Cetra, who had been quiet up until now, looked at Alex with wide eyes. "You understand, don't you? If the Empire finds out what I'm trying to do, they'll stop at nothing to get the device back. They'll destroy everything to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands." "I know," Alex said, meeting her gaze. "But we can't wait anymore. We can't just run forever. We need to get the message out." Cetra hesitated but nodded. "I agree. But it's dangerous. We'll need to find a communication hub, one that's not monitored by the Empire. There's a place in the city, a hidden transmitter. It's the only chance we have to get this message out to the right people." Alex turned to Mark, who had been silent up until now. "Do you know where it is?" Mark's face darkened, but he nodded. "I know the place, but it's heavily guarded. Getting to it won't be easy." Alex clenched his fists. "We don't have a choice." They set off once more, moving quickly through the streets, staying in the shadows to avoid being seen. The city felt colder tonight, more oppressive. The familiar streets seemed different now, as if they had become a maze, each corner hiding danger. As they approached the transmitter's location, Alex's stomach twisted with nerves. He had no idea what they would face when they got there. Would the Resistance really be able to stop the Empire, or would they be walking into a trap? They reached an abandoned building, the walls cracked and peeling. Mark led the way, moving quickly to a hidden door at the back. He punched in a code on a keypad, and the door creaked open, revealing a dark staircase leading underground. "This is it," Mark said. "Once we're inside, we'll be safe, for now." Alex's mind was racing, but he forced himself to focus. They couldn't afford to think too much about what could go wrong. They had to believe this would work. Cetra held the device tightly in her hands, her knuckles white with pressure. Alex couldn't imagine the weight of the responsibility she carried. The fate of her people, and possibly the whole galaxy, rested on this one moment. They descended into the darkness, the air growing heavier with each step. When they reached the bottom, they found a small room filled with outdated equipment. Mark quickly set to work, flipping switches and typing codes into a dusty terminal. "This will take a few minutes," he said, his voice tense. "But once the broadcast is sent, we'll be on their radar. We'll need to leave fast." Alex nodded, standing guard by the door while Cetra watched Mark work. The quiet hum of the equipment was the only sound in the room, a sharp contrast to the urgency in the air. Finally, Mark looked up, his face grim. It's done. The signal is sent. Alex felt a rush of relief. But before he could speak, a loud bang echoed from the far side of the building. The soldiers had found them. We need to go now, Alex shouted. With one last look at Citra, Alex grabbed her hand and ran for the exit. The chase was far from over, but they had done what they came to do. The signal had been sent, and now they had a fighting chance. The moment the signal had been sent, the entire atmosphere seemed to shift. The urgency in the air became palpable. They had done what they set out to do, but now they had to survive the consequences. As Alex and Citra ran through the dark alleyways, Mark leading the way, Alex's mind raced. The soldiers were close, and the streets offered no safe hiding places. But the signal was out. The resistance had the data. They had a chance. Stay close, Mark ordered, his voice sharp with command as they moved faster, ducking behind a row of abandoned cars. The city felt more dangerous than ever now, as if every corner they turned was a potential trap. We can't stop now, Alex said through clenched teeth. He was breathing hard, but the thought of Citra in danger kept him pushing forward. Citra, despite her exhaustion, stayed close behind. Her eyes were constantly scanning their surroundings. She was in a similar state of panic, but there was a determination in her face that Alex couldn't ignore. We need to get to the safe zone, she said quietly, her voice strained. I know, Alex replied, barely able to hear her over the sounds of their running footsteps. We just need a little more time. But Citra shook her head, her eyes sharp. Time is running out, Alex. They know we're here. If we don't move quickly, we're all dead. Alex's heart skipped a beat at her words. He had been trying to stay calm, trying to believe they could make it, but now he realized just how close they were to losing everything. They turned a corner and came face to face with a group of soldiers. Their armor gleamed in the dim light, and their weapons were raised. Alex stopped dead in his tracks, his mind going blank for a split second. We're trapped, Mark said, his voice low and defeated. Citra stepped forward, her body tensed and ready to fight. Alex knew she wouldn't back down. Not now, not after everything they'd been through. But before anyone could move, one of the soldiers spoke. Hold your fire, the soldier commanded. They're not our target. Alex's mind raced. What was going on? Had they been caught? But as he looked at the soldier more closely, he noticed something that made his stomach drop. The soldier wasn't looking at him or Citra. He was looking at Mark. Mark? Alex asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. Mark's face tightened. He knew exactly what Alex was thinking. I didn't have a choice, Mark said, his voice hoarse. I had to help you. I couldn't let them. Before Mark could finish, the leader of the soldiers stepped forward, removing his helmet. I'm here to help, the leader said, his voice firm but calm. We'd received the broadcast. It's not too late. Alex's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he was sure he had misunderstood, but the soldier's next words proved him wrong. The Empire is crumbling. You did it. The resistance will be able to take them down. Citra's eyes widened in disbelief. But how? How can we trust you? The soldier smiled, his face softening. Because I'm one of them. I've been working with the resistance from the inside. You didn't just send a signal, Citra. You sent a message to everyone who's been waiting. The Empire will fall. Alex felt a wave of relief wash over him, but it was mixed with confusion. This was the moment they had fought for, but there was still so much they didn't understand. We need to move, the soldier said, his voice low but urgent. They'll retaliate soon. We don't have much time. Without a word, Alex and Citra followed the soldier, Mark trailing behind. As they moved through the dark streets, Alex couldn't help but think about how everything had changed in such a short time. They had survived the impossible, and now, the fate of entire worlds rested in their hands. Citra turned to him, her voice soft. "Thank you, Alex. I never could have made it without you." Alex looked at her, seeing the exhaustion in her eyes, but also the strength that had kept her going. "We made it this far together," he said, his voice steady. "And we're not stopping now." As the night stretched on, the future remained uncertain. But one thing was clear: no matter the odds, they had a chance. And that was all they needed to keep fighting.